Greetings, folks. By the time this episode is released, my bride and I will have landed in Athens, Greece for our pilgrimage with our fellow Pathways church members. Now, Denise and I, along with two other couples, we actually arrived in Greece a couple of days before the rest of the group from our church will be arriving. Sort of a mini vacation prior to the pilgrimage, if you will. A well-deserved short break as well. You see, up until last Saturday, I have spent 83 days away from home working so far this year. That is just my out-of-state work and does not take into consideration the time spent in the home office preparing for those trips, not to mention the time spent working on the campaign. And seeing how last Saturday was the 133rd day of the year, that means I have spent nearly 2/3 of this year so far sleeping in hotel rooms and not at home with my bride. That also means that I prepared this episode's release well in advance and will be doing something a bit different this week. One of the few things that will be a bit different in this show is how I will show you that when a lot of politicians and political candidates speak, it is most often in platitudes and generalities. It will be done in a slideshow presentation. I will also be sharing with you all the first of many of my campaign videos that were recorded during my last brief stop at home in April. I'll also be showing a video from another organization. It is a video that should provide an example of how every elected official should behave. And the example is provided by one of Tennessee's most celebrated and historic elected officials. The video is roughly 18 minutes long, so I'll be breaking it up into two segments. But please watch the entire thing for the valuable lesson learned that it contains. And finally, as has been the routine for the past few months, I must include this disclaimer with my podcast because it definitely relates to my campaign. So here it goes. The following content is approved by Larry Linton for TN12, candidate for the GOP nomination for Tennessee House of Representatives, District 12. Larry Linton, Treasurer. Now let's get on with this week's episode of the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast, where I will show you an example of a candidate's platitudes and generalities and tell you how it contributes to the erosion of the people's liberty. So let's take a stand in the arena together again this week, folks, and get on with the show. Welcome to the Liberty, Leadership, and Lies podcast. On this show, we will discuss the assaults on our liberty by the very institution we the people created to secure our liberty. We will also compare and contrast the actions of people in leadership positions to the servant leadership that is needed to protect our God-given, constitutionally protected rights. Additionally, we will break down the many lies that elected and unelected officials in government and media spin every day in order to secure for themselves positions of power and influence that are antithetical to the system of government our founding fathers created and passed down to us. Your host on this program is Larry Linton, a 30-year veteran of the United States Navy who also runs his own leadership consulting company. He is also a candidate for the Republican Party's nomination to represent Tennessee's House District 12, which includes Gatlinburg, Pigeon Forge, Pittman Center, Weirs Valley, Seymour, and parts of Sevierville, and most of Sevier County. So here is your host, Larry Linton. Okay, folks, I'm going to share with you a slideshow that I put together, and we'll discuss each slide as they come up. The slideshow and my first campaign advertisement will take up the first segment. Segments 2 and 3 are where I will show a video that contains a valuable lesson that our elected officials have long forgotten. And they have purposely forgotten it too, so that the communists and establishment Republicans in Washington, D.C. can rob us of our sweat equity and erode our liberty. First, here is my campaign ad. I would like to know what you all think about it. If you're watching on Rumble or YouTube, please leave a comment on the video. As it relates to that, I want to remind the audience that I do not earn any money from this podcast. The likes and subscribes on whatever platform you watch or listen to just impacts the algorithm. Many of you that follow me on social media may have already seen this campaign video as it was released on the 4th of May. If you are listening to an audio-only version of the show, send your feedback to the email address larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com. Again, that is larry@libertyleadershipandlies.com. So here's the campaign video.
Hello, Tennessee. I'm Larry Linton, retired Command Master Chief. Over my 30 years in the Navy, I never backed down from a challenge. When I retired from the Navy, I chose Tennessee to call home because I wanted to build my life in the most beautiful place in America. But now I see that the fight for our state, for our values, is a battle against a different kind of opponent. The establishment that's forgotten the people. And I'm ready to bring the same resolve I had in the Navy to now stand up to the establishment, to be a voice for you, undaunted and unwavering. You know, it's easy to go along to get along, but that's just not me. I've led teams through storms, both literal and metaphorical, by making tough calls when they mattered most. Tennessee deserves a leader who's not afraid to stand up for what's right, who will fight for our freedoms with a courage that's tested and true. This isn't just about holding office and sitting in a chair collecting a paycheck. It's about holding the line for our principles, for our future. It's about being the one man willing to stand up when the cowards are sitting down. And when I take office, I will be donating every penny of my salary to faith-based charities in Sevier County. I'm Larry Linton, and I want to bring courage to the Capitol. Join me. Together we can face down any storm, stand tall against any foe, and ensure Tennessee remains the land of the free and the home of the brave. Vote for courage. Vote for integrity. Vote Larry Linton for Tennessee's State Legislature, District 12.
Well, folks, I hope you liked it. Again, your feedback would be greatly appreciated. There are more videos to come, so please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, Getter, Gab, MeWe, and True Social. The links to my social media sites are in the video description on Rumble. Now, for the rest of this segment, I'm going to provide you some examples of a political candidate using platitudes and generalities in order to solicit support and votes. This is the typical behavior of a candidate or an elected official that will not take a firm stance on principles during their campaign. And then once elected, will only work on their re-election, often using the same platitudes and generalities on their campaign website and social media pages. We'll also demonstrate some hypocrisy because that is one of the establishment's preferred methods of communication. All right, so let's get on with the slideshow. All right, folks, platitudes and generalities. What they are indicative of is a lack of principles. And they are the typical rhetoric used by establishment and the communists. Now, I'm going to go over a few of these platitudes and generalities in the next few slides. Now, I'm highlighting a certain candidate. Many of you may recognize who he is. And for disclosure's sake, for the people that don't reside in Tennessee House District 12, this is one of my primary opponents. So the first one here, good education is key to success. He states that he'll fight for policies that empower parents and provide our children with the quality education they deserve. Well, he's been on the county commission here for 20 plus years, and he has not done that. He's been in a position that he was able to do that, yet he hasn't done that. So what does that mean? Of course, he lacks the principles. Here's the next one. He says concerns matter. He's here to listen and will work towards practical solutions that benefit District 12 once elected. Now, I've had several friends and associates that have reached out to him not only on his Facebook page, but also through email, asking him to provide specific stances on certain issues. And he responds with, hey, contact me. You know why? Because he doesn't want it made public. He wants to do it in private. Again, lack of principles. Here's the next one. Infrastructure is essential for success. Look at that next phrase. I'll advocate for investments that enhance our roads and bridges. Okay, he's going to be in Nashville. He's going to be doing it for the whole state. But just look at the roads and bridges here in Sevier County. He's been in a position, for more than 20 years to effectively do that. And I would ask the residents of House District 12, most of Sevier County, are you happy with the condition of the roads and bridges here? Are you happy with the infrastructure? I mean, there was a report just a few weeks ago that we don't have enough water to support what we have going on in our county right now. And he's been in a position to affect that. Always beware when a politician or a political candidate uses those word investments or uses that word investments. That means they're going to dip into your pocket. You're going to invest. He's not investing anything other than your money. This next one, Tennessee thrives on individual freedom. He'll work to reduce government intervention, ensuring that our liberties are protected. Now, his work on the county commission has been one of government intervention, encroaching on our liberties. Somehow, is it being elected to the General Assembly going to change that? Absolutely not. But people are buying that. Here's another one. Strengthening family values is at the core of my campaign. These generalities and platitudes, they remind me of Ross Perot when he was running for president a few years ago, a couple decades ago. In every press conference, when he was ever asked a question, he would always respond with, well, that's my number one priority. Doesn't matter what the question or the issue was. Ross Perot would always say, well, that's my number one priority. Really? Again, platitudes and generalities. And how does he think he's going to affect family values? Whose family values, right? The government doesn't belong in the business of family values. We've seen where it's taken our country right now. The next one, powering entrepreneurs. Now, really, remember the lockdowns and business shuttering of 2020? Guess what? He was in a position where he could have put a stop to that, but he didn't. This is a platitude or a generality that demonstrates his lack of principles. Local businesses are the heartbeat of our community. Bill Lee put something out about that a couple of weeks ago, too. He's going to be a strong advocate for policies that foster growth, job creation, and prosperity right here in District 12. Really? Again, remember the lockdowns and business shutterings of 2020. He also says he'll advocate for affordable healthcare solutions that prioritize the well-being of our residents. Really? What is he saying there? What exactly does he propose? Or he's just going to advocate for what? Where's the position? There's never going to be a position. He's going to fall in lockstep with whatever the majority in Nashville wants or whatever the Speaker of the House wants. And we all know his track record, don't we? Again, this candidate lacks principles. Addressing the opioid crisis is a crucial part of our community's well-being. Initiatives that combat addiction and provide support. Really? Exactly what? Again, he is not proposing anything. He's not taking a firm stance anywhere. Agriculture is the backbone. He'll support policies that aid. Whose policies? Does he have any policies that he wants to propose? Has he discussed them with anybody? Absolutely not, because he will not take a position one way or another during the campaign. Low tax state is a priority. Absolutely. But you know what? We have the second highest state sales tax in the country. Is he committed to reducing that? Absolutely not, because government officials like him thrive on robbing people of their sweat equity. Now, here's this one. Dale Carr is retiring. Now, Dale Carr, he does have a somewhat conservative record, but he has also been the lapdog of the House Speaker. He will do and say whatever the Speaker or the Majority Leader Lambert dictates to him. Do we want another establishment candidate in there? That's what's going to happen if we get this guy. And now here we come with a hypocritical part, right? I want you to see this post, right? He quotes Ronald Reagan there. Says he's one of the greats. The most terrifying words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. But let's go back to Fred Ashley's announcement for his campaign. There's his statement. I did a little bit of highlighting there for you. It says, my enthusiasm is rooted in a genuine desire to help people. He wants the government to help people. That is the height of hypocrisy. Now, platitudes and generalities, like I said, they indicate a lack of principles. It means he will not take a stand in the arena in defense of liberty if it threatens his position. He will take a stand to protect his and the establishment's interests, not the people of this county, not the people of this state. That's going to conclude the show, folks. Now we'll pick this back up in the next segment with a new video. Now, that'll wrap up the slideshow, folks. The next two segments will be an informational video that everyone should share with their elected officials. Remember, if government helps one person, they must first take it from other people to do that. So stick with me after this short break to watch this informative video. As I said in the introduction, this week's episode will be a bit different. In this segment and the following one, I'll be sharing a great video I found that goes to the heart of government spending. It is a narration about a speech given by one of the most famous Tennesseans that has ever lived, Davy Crockett. So stay tuned for the next 7 or 8 minutes while I kick off this video.
Born on a mountaintop in Tennessee. Welcome back to the Story of Liberty. This is John Bona. You may have heard of Davy Crockett. I grew up hearing songs about Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier. Remember Davy Crockett? He gave a great speech before the House of Representatives. He was perhaps best known for his role in the 1836 defense of the Alamo. Also, he served 3 times in the United States Congress from 1827 to 1835. The life of Davy Crockett was incredible, and he learned the true meaning of our Constitution, the importance of adhering to our Constitution, and the perils of ignoring its restrictions. It's recorded what I'm about to tell you, that one day in the House of Representatives, a bill was taken up appropriating money for the benefit of a widow of a distinguished naval officer. Several beautiful speeches had been made in support, and the speaker was just about to put the question when Mr. Davy Crockett arose. He said, "Mr. Speaker, I have as much respect for the memory of the deceased and as much sympathy for the suffering of the living, if suffering there be, as any man in this house. But we must not permit our respect for the dead or our sympathy for the part of the living to lead us into an act of injustice to the balance of the living. I will not go into an argument to prove that Congress has no power to appropriate this money as an act of charity. Every member upon this floor knows it. We have the right as individuals to give away as much money of our own money as we please in charity. But as members of Congress, we have no right so to appropriate a dollar of the public money." See, Davy Crockett knew the government was not benevolent. The government was a taker and a spender, even back in the 1800s. And what it took from the taxpayers. Colonel Crockett continued. He said, "Some eloquent appeals have been made to us upon the ground that it is a debt due the deceased. Mr. Speaker, the deceased lived long after the close of the war. He was in office to the day of his death, and I have never heard that the government was in arrears to him. Every man in this house knows it is not a debt. We cannot, without the grossest corruption, appropriate this money as the payment of a debt." See, Colonel Crockett knew it was not a debt that the government could pay. Colonel Crockett said further, "We have not the semblance of authority to appropriate it as a charity. Mr. Speaker, I have said we have the right to give as much money of our own as we please. I am the poorest man on this floor. I cannot vote for this bill, but I will give 1 week's pay to the object. And if every member of Congress will do the same, It will amount to more than the bill is asking for. Colonel Crockett took his seat and nobody replied. The bill was put on its passage, and instead of passing unanimously, as was generally supposed, and as no doubt it would, but for that speech, it received but few votes and, of course, was lost. Later, when asked by a friend why he had opposed the appropriation, Crockett gave this explanation. He said, several years ago, one evening standing on the steps of the Capitol with some other members of Congress, when our attention was attracted by a great light over in Georgetown. It was evidently a large fire. We jumped into the hack and drove over as fast as we could. In spite of all that we could do, many houses were burned and many families made homeless. And besides, some of them had lost all but their clothes they had on. The weather was very cold, and when I saw so many women and children suffering, I felt that something ought to be done for them. The next morning, the bill was introduced, appropriating $20,000 for their relief. We put aside all their business, and we rushed it through as soon as it could be done. The next summer, when it began to be time to think about the election, I concluded I would take a scout around among the boys of my district. I had no opposition there, but as the election was some time off, I did not know what might turn up. When riding one day in part of my district in which I was more of a stranger than any other, I saw a man in the field plowing and coming toward the road. He came up to me and I spoke to the man. He replied politely, but as I had thought, rather coldly. I began, well, friend, I am one of those unfortunate beings called candidates. And yes, I know you. You are Colonel Crockett. I have seen you once before and voted for you the last time you were elected. I suppose you are out campaigning now, but you had better not waste your time or mine. I shall not vote for you again, sir. That was a shock to Colonel Crockett. He said he begged him to tell him what was the matter. Well, Colonel, the man responded, it is hardly worthwhile to waste time or words upon it. I do not see how it can be mended, but you gave a vote last winter which shows that you neither have not the capacity to understand the Constitution. You are not the man to represent me. But I beg your pardon for expressing it that way. I did not intend to avail myself of the privilege of the constituent to speak plainly to a candidate for the purpose of insulting or wounding you. I intended by it only to say that your understanding of the Constitution is very different from mine. And I will say to you what, but for my rudeness, I should not have said, that I believe you to be honest. But an understanding of the Constitution different from mine, I cannot overlook, because the Constitution, to be worth anything, must be held sacred and rigidly observed in all its provisions. The man who wields power and misrepresented is the more dangerous, the more honest he is. Crockett commented, he said, I admit the truth of all you say, but there must be some mistake about it, for I do not remember that I gave any vote last winter upon any constitutional question. No, Colonel, there's no mistake. Though I live here in the backwoods and seldom go from home, I take the papers from Washington, and I read very carefully all the proceedings in Congress. My papers say that last winter, you voted for a bill to appropriate $20,000 to some sufferers by a fire in Georgetown. Is that true?
So far, so good, right? Stay tuned and we'll finish up the video after the next break.
Colonel Davy Crockett replied. He said, well, my friend, I may as well own up. You've got me there. But certainly nobody will complain that a great and rich country like ours should give the insignificant sum of $20,000 to relieve its suffering women and children, particularly with a full and overflowing treasury. And I am sure if you had been there, you would have done just as I did. The man responded, "It is not the amount, Colonel Crockett, that I complain of. It is the principle. In the first place, the government ought to have in the treasury no more than enough for its legitimate purposes. But that has nothing to do with the question. The power of collecting and distributing money at pleasure is the most dangerous power that can be trusted to man, particularly under our system of collecting revenue by tariff, which reaches every man in the country, no matter how poor he may be. Worse it is, it presses upon him without his knowledge where the weight centers. For there is not a man in the United States who can ever guess how much he pays to the government. So you see that while you are contributing to relieve one, you are drawing it from thousands who are even worse off than he. If you had the right to give anything, the amount was simply a matter of discretion with you. And you had as much right to give 20 million as 20,000. If you had the right to give to one, you have the right to give to all. And as the Constitution neither defines charity or stipulates the amount, you are at liberty to give to anything and everything which you may believe or profess to believe is a charity, and to any amount you may think proper. You will easily perceive what a wide door this would open for fraud and corruption and favoritism on the one hand, and for robbing the people on the other. No, Colonel, Congress has no right to give charity. Folks, that's what I'm saying. The government is not benevolent. We have drifted so far. Listen to the remainder of this story. It's true. The man continued. He said, individual members may give as much of their own money as they please, but they have no right to touch a dollar of the public money for that purpose. If twice as many houses had been burned in this country as in Georgetown, neither you nor any other member of Congress would have thought of appropriating a dollar for our relief. There are about 240 members of Congress. If they had shown their sympathy for the sufferers by contributing each 1 week's pay, it would have made over 13,000. There are plenty of men in and around Washington who could have given $20,000 without depriving themselves of even a luxury of life. The people have delegated to Congress by the Constitution the power to do certain things. To do these, it is authorized to collect and pay monies, and for nothing else. Everything beyond this is usurpation and a violation of the Constitution. You see, Colonel, you have violated the Constitution in what I consider a vital point. It is a precedent fraught with danger to the country. For when Congress once begins to stretch its power beyond the limits of the Constitution, there is no limit to it and no security for the people. I have doubt you have acted honestly, but that does not make it any better. Except as far as you are personally concerned, you see that I cannot vote for you. Well, Davy Crockett was changed that day by that man at the plow. Davy Crockett said, I cannot answer him, for the fact is I was so fully convinced that he was right. I did not want to, but I must satisfy him. And I said to him, well, my friend, you hit the nail upon the head when you said, I did not have sense enough to understand the Constitution. I intended to be guided by it and thought I had studied it fully. I have heard many speeches in Congress about the powers of Congress. But what you said here, sir, at your plow has got more hard, sound sense in it than all the fine speeches I have ever heard. If I had ever taken the view of it that you have, I would have put my head into the fire before I would have given that vote. And if I ever vote for another constitutional law, I wish I may be shot. Well, there you have it, folks. Davy Crockett, king of the wild frontier, one day came to know and understand the Constitution of the United States. And what do we see today? The growth of government spending has been accomplished by a significant change in the types of programs being funded. Only 1/4 of the federal government spending is now used for the more traditional government purchase programs, such as defense, transportation, physical resources, commerce, and international affairs. More than 60% is now used for transfer payments. The kind of payment Davy Crockett said he would have put his head into a fire before he would approve that vote. These include direct payments to individuals and grants to state and local government. These kinds of payments, Colonel Davy Crockett said he would take a bullet for than vote for it. See, when the payment of interest on the national debt is added to the amount spent on transfer payments, non-purchase spending equals 3/4 of the total federal government spending. Do we wonder why we're printing money hand over fist? Do we wonder why we have a $16 trillion debt that's growing over $1 trillion a year? Do we wonder why we don't even have a budget? Because our Congress cannot pass a budget. It's fiscal insanity, and the economic earthquake is sure to come unless something is done. Davy Crockett knew it almost 200 years ago. It's time we wake up, America. Balance the budget now.
Well, I hope you all enjoyed that video. I want to thank you all for watching or listening this week, folks. There are a lot of moving pieces with the campaign, my business, as well as the shenanigans with the Tennessee GOP going forward from now until August 1st. Please subscribe or follow all of my social media pages and the podcast in all its platforms. As a reminder, there will not be a new episode produced for the next 2 weeks while I am out of the country. Subscribe to the blog on libertyleadershipandlies.com to keep up with any news regarding the campaign. I would not be surprised if the establishment tries some shady stuff while I'm out of the country and unable to respond in person. Remember, you heard that here first. And for now, a bit of wisdom from God's word. This week, it comes to us from the book of Colossians, chapter 2, verse 8. See to it that no one takes you captive by philosophy and empty deceit, according to human tradition, according to the elemental spirits of the world, and not according to Christ. Empty deceit is what we get from the establishment Republicans and the communists in the realms of politics these days. In the first segment, I misspoke when I called out a candidate's statement as hypocrisy. I believe, much as one of the greats out there in the conservative movement, Mr. Dan Bongino, that these types of statements and actions, they're not hypocrisy. Their hierarchy. These people in the positions of power and control will say and do anything because they believe they can get away with it precisely because of their positions of power and control. Just like the communists, the establishment Republicans behave the same way. I believe they absolutely know that their statements of platitudes and generalities are just that. The empty promises and vague language they have used for generations now, and that have elevated them to those positions of power. They are the most effective tools that the communists and establishment Republicans use. Why are they useful? Because they count on the apathy of the voters. The voters eat them up like candy, only to be disappointed in the end. We can put an end to that. The voters here in House District 12 can put an end to their hierarchical push of platitudes and generalities and send the candidate whose principles are firm and unwavering. You know who that candidate is. And most assuredly isn't the candidate highlighted in the first segment, who has to rely on the county GOP breaking the state GOP's bylaws to get a leg up in the primaries, along with the state GOP, who has aided and abetted the violation of their own bylaws by their leadership's silence. Once again, I am humbly asking you that you all take a stand in the arena with me this primary election. Together, we can work to force Nashville to do the will of the people instead of the will of the corporations and the central government in Washington, D.C. Until the next episode, Reveille, it's time to wake up.